Welcome to Sage Audio. Today, we're creating an EDM mastering chain in 10 steps. But first, if you have a mix that you need to have mastered, send it to us to receive a free mastered sample of it with the link in the description. Mid-side equalization. With this mid-side EQ, I'll cut some of the low frequencies from the side image, then boost around 200 Hz, or where I found some of the important low-ordered harmonics. Lastly, for the side image, I boosted the highs with a shelf, making them wider. On the mid image, I amplified the fundamental of the kick, dipped a small amount of 250 Hz to help the higher frequencies sound louder, and boosted 3 kHz for the same reason. The frequencies and Q values that you end up picking will probably vary slightly, but this should be a good starting point. Let's take a listen to a full A and B of the unmastered and mastered tracks using peak normalization to make them easier to compare. Split EQ and panning. I inserted the split EQ by Eventide and amplified the lows, the high mids, and the highs using the transient and the tonal bands shown in green and blue respectively. Now once I found how much I wanted to amplify, I opened up the panning section to introduce mid-side panning. Notice that on the lows I centered the transients, on the high mids I subtly widened the tone, and on the highs I centered the transients and widened the tone band a good amount. Now this greatly increased the impact of the kick while helping me find a good balance between width and transient detail in the highs. Let's take a listen and let me know in the comments if you can hear a difference. If you're enjoying the video, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It's free and it helps us bring you more videos. Mid-side resonance reduction. I use this resonance reducer to subtly balance the frequency spectrum. You could put this processor later on in the chain to help reduce some of the resonances caused by your processing, but I found that it worked well earlier in the chain. Now notice that I kept the kick from triggering the processor. Then I got very subtle attenuation from the rest of the frequency spectrum and blended the effect in with the mix dial. Let's take a listen and let me know if you think that this sounds a little bit more balanced. Bringing up details. I went through a few upward processors and found that this inflator sounded the best for this particular mix. I used an aggressive effect percentage, but then compensated for that by lowering the input slightly. I found that the band split setting with a slightly higher curve value sounded best to me. That said, be sure to use your ear and find the processor and the settings that you enjoy the most. Let's take a listen and notice how the track becomes fuller. Exciting high frequencies. At this point, I felt that the highs were lacking, so I used this free fresh air plugin to amplify 2 high shelf filters, as well as add harmonics to the high frequencies. I used slightly more aggressive settings than I typically would, since I felt that the track called for it. Let's take a listen and notice how the plugin creates a noticeably brighter, more detailed high frequency range. Mid-frequency, upward bus. Using a bus and an auxiliary track, I first used a linear phase EQ to isolate the mid-image of the mid-frequencies. I set this to include a good combination of the low mids to high mids, but include what you feel sounds best. Then, I inserted this upward compressor. With it, I decreased the dynamic range from the noise floor up and from the peaks down to create a really dense sound before blending it in with the aux tracks channel fader. Let's take a listen and let me know if you think that this creates a more dense and upfront sound. Omnipressor on output. I was worried that this processor wouldn't fit the genre since it seems more geared towards rock. However, it worked perfectly for increasing the kick's impact and controlling dynamics. It both compresses and expands whenever the signal is above or below the threshold, causing a greatly controlled dynamic range. Now, since we're mastering, I used subtle settings and a low ratio, but still noticed a big impact to the track's perceived loudness and punchiness. Let's take a listen to it. If you're enjoying the channel, use the search box to watch more of our videos. Hard clipping to transients. Before I start my limiting stages, I want to clip the transients just enough to cause some white noise whenever they cross the threshold. Now this way, the transients are controlled. However, the white noise makes them sound as if they're still present, letting me use more limiting later on. Let's take a listen and let me know if you find that the transients sound a little brighter to you. Limiting, Stage 1. For the first limiting stage, let's use this Oxford limiter with a fast attack, fast release, no dithering, no auto gain compensation, and about 25% of the enhance function dialed in. Now this enhance function in particular brings up quiet details, including any white noise that we added from clipping. Let's take a listen and notice how the track sounds fuller, more aggressive, and how we achieve loudness without the need for aggressive peak attenuation. Limiting, Stage 2. When mastering EDM, I like to use a second limiter to introduce either a dynamic or transient enhancing algorithm. Now this way, I can increase the loudness slightly and keep the impact of the dynamics. In this instance, I use some oversampling, no look ahead, and a quick attack and release. I also chose to delink the left and right channels, causing attenuation to them separately. Now I like this option whenever I'm using heavy limiting, since it brings a little life and variation back into the track. Lastly, I brought this master up to about -6.5 to -6 LUFS, as is pretty standard with EDM, but feel free to make yours a little louder or quieter as you see fit. Let's take a listen to the full before and after one more time to see where we started and where we ended up. If you have a mix that you need to have mastered, send it to us to receive a free mastered sample of it with the link in the description. Thank you so much for watching.